science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Sonic salutations, all you Cognonauts out there, and welcome to another episode of Exofathom. I am Nick, and I am joined with my two lovely co-hosts as always. Mike, how are you?
You know me, man. I'm hanging in there.
Very good, very good. And we have Ayla here. Ayla, how are you?
What's up? I'm good. How are you today? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy Friday to you guys as well, or anytime you're listening to this. We very much appreciate it. Tonight we're going to be talking about Ohm. And when I looked into this topic, I thought, oh, this is going to be a really interesting new stuff that nobody's ever talked about before. And then I realized, this is all the stuff that we've been talking about for the past several years now on this show. So it's probably going to be a bit more casual than rigorous. We will talk about what Ohm is, where it comes from, what it symbolizes, and sound's effect on the universe and possibly creation. And we might get into some other things here and there, but nothing too out there. But yeah, guys, I guess I wanted to ask you guys first and foremost. I have two questions. First, can somebody give me a good Ohm? Either one of you.
Well, I think there's two schools of thought on the Ohm. I've heard two in many a yoga class. I'm happy to share both for your listening pleasure. Okay, so there's like the soft Ohm, which is like I feel really silly, but I'm gonna go for it. Okay, where it's just like right, like simple, right? And then I had this one yoga teacher, and he did kirtan, and he had like a very pronounced chest cavity, and he would go he would do this low alley-oop thing, which it really jived with. Like I would mimic him, and the whole class would, and we'd be all like, woo. But I don't know which is correct, to be honest with you.
Oh, I don't know if there is a wrong way.
Yeah, I think as long as you're hitting that vibration. I mean, let me say I could do a low one. Just now my voice is.
Do it. Ooh, you're like a little sea crystal bowl.
I can feel the resonation there. Very good.
Yeah, there's like root chakra.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, puberty.
yeah. Kicks you down a couple octaves. That works.
Nick, how about your Ohm?
I could do an Ohm. Let me see. Ohm.
Nice. Very Nick.
There you go.
And you're cracking me up. We did a group Ohm one time. I remember we were up in Northern California. There's a couple of us Ohming together, and he didn't start right away. So a couple of minutes in, you just hear this like, oh. He just came in so low. It was messed up. One should not judge another person's Ohm, but
yes. You guys did Ohm shame me that night. So
you totally did. To my everlasting shame. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. But I think that was a good exercise to exhibit how each person probably has a sort of unique Ohm. I think I heard some uniqueness from Mike and from you, Ayla.
That's just because I'm tone deaf. That's all it is.
That's okay. Yeah. But that would, to me, kind of lend a little bit of credence to what we might talk about a little bit later with this concept of resonation, and perhaps each person's Ohm is a little bit different because we all have a different frequency of resonation. So thank you for that, guys. We really appreciate it. And my next question to you, and and this doesn't necessarily have to be something that you've done before, but perhaps might consider, or if you don't do it, what would it be? But the question is, do you guys have a mantra that you like to go over in your head? And if you don't, what would be your mantra if you were to create one right now?
Well, I'm very fond of the "Don't be crazy" mantra. Constantly feeling a little extra from my day to day, but no, I've always been partial to the Om Mani Padme Om mantra, which I'm also, it's an interesting one. You can kind of look at the meaning, and it gets really layered. But yeah, that's always been one of my favorites.
I believe that's the jewel is in the lotus. There's Om Mani Padme Hum. Yeah, that's a good one. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a specific Buddhist mantra, but if, like Ayla, you're saying, don't be crazy, that can be a mantra too. And it can actually help. So, I'm glad that you shared that. We also have Corey in the house tuning in. Hey, Corey.
Hello.
Yes. Can you hit the subharmonic register? No, I am not a Tuvan throat singer. I wish I was.
There's a great song. I'll mention it, but
yes, if you can find a link, we can post it in the chat box so people can check it out. But yes, it would be very cool to be able to hit the subharmonic level the way the Tuvan throat singers do. I am not able to do that, but that's okay. Mike, what about you? Mantra wise, do you have a mantra, or if you don't, what would yours be?
I don't know if I have a mantra, man. Like, I know when it comes to like vibrations, I see kind of there's songs that I'll repeat that'll get me to a certain place, whether it be good or bad. And I know mantras are supposed to be short, but long enough, it's still a pattern of vibration and sound, pattern of vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I do know for a while, like when I was younger, I think it played more of a thing with yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think I ever really kind of had one outside of like, fuck it.
That can be a mantra, definitely.
Although
if you're just sitting there just saying fuck it, fuck it, fuck it, fuck it, you might get confused there. Something might come along and be suggested towards you.
It's always that.
Well, man, it would explain a lot of things in my life. Let me tell you.
The universe may misinterpret that. That's what I'm saying.
There are things that get you out of indecision, or I guess I kind of like coming from like a nihilist school of thought. It was always like sort of like nothing matters sort of thing. So why not take a chance? Why not try something or do something like that? And that sort of nothing matters, repeating over and over, was, I guess, the closest thing to a mantra that I held deeply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that could be certainly part of it. I think we also covered this. Yes, it can be definitely liberating. I think we also kind of covered this a little bit in our Memento Mori episode that you did. Having this sort of reminder, like, this concept of nothing mattering, being a constant repetition in your mind kind of keeps you on track. And that's what I think that mantras can definitely do for you. It just depends on the need. I don't know if I would sit there and be actively participating in a mantra, but I think I've done that before. Mostly or revolving around gratitude, I think more often than anything else. Just because, again, I think I get a little bit superstitious about the universe. And if I were to chant fuck it over and over and over again, I don't know how the universe would
it depends on that.
I guess there's no wrong answers if that's what you're into, but
in the dark. Never mind. I'm not gonna go there.
Okay.
Continue.
That's okay. No worries. This is all to really just kind of touch around something that I wanted to at least explore a little bit in this episode, and it's the concept between sound and reality, not the concept, but the relationship between sound and reality. I think that that's something that's been sort of interwoven into our cultures and mythologies for a long time, but it's also something that we don't necessarily, I don't know if we think about all that often, just how important vibration and sound and resonance is to the base material of reality. And so I hope that I can illuminate a little bit of that in this episode, and then we can also kind of get into some other stuff involving resonance and consciousness and all of those fun things. Yes, Corey's got a comment here. Tolkien comes to mind. Thank you. I will be talking about the, let me see. I always mispronounce it, so I have it written down here. It is called the Ainulindale, which is Tolkien's creation myth, which is heavily influenced by the concept of sound creating reality.
Is that the same as the beginning of the Silmarillion?
Yes, that is what that is. I think the Ainulindale is the title of the first chapter of the Silmarillion,
which is very well written.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good run. We went like 30 episodes without bringing up Lord of the Rings.
It was bound to happen. It was bound to happen. And at least we won't be really talking about the Lord of the Rings. We'll be talking about more of the creation myth stuff. But do you guys have any thoughts about sound and reality? And just to start off with, I know we had an episode about light and sound that Mike did. But yeah, any prior thoughts about sound and its effect on reality?
Yeah, it can paint. I think it can paint the whole reality really for you. I find it highly important. But I'm somebody that goes around listening to music most of the day. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a way to get into flow states, or to get into like emotional states, or to get out of emotional states. It's a very important tool for me.
Sure. Ayla, what about you?
Yes, sorry. Right before the show, I witnessed a monster mosquito, and I was putting on thicker pants halfway through the show because I Googled one mosquito can eat you multiple times. So screw that. Of course. So sound, it's an interesting thing, right? Thinking of mosquitoes, they let off a bzzz, and we've been trained to respond to them in a certain way, just like bees or rattlesnakes. So I think, we're already sort of biologically wired to use sound as a way to sort of understand our surroundings, and maybe have like some sense of predictability. And, like Mike was saying, that's probably why I'm a fan of music all day too. I've got my ramp up playlist or my cool down playlist, the meditation playlists. And I think, as you curate those different groups of songs, you can really sort of engineer your day, which becomes important when your mantra is don't be crazy.
It does indeed become important. Yes. Yeah, I think you guys touch on there. I think there's a million explanations for why sound is important. So it's not like there's going to be one in particular. But I was trying to think about like, why is it so deep rooted? And we'll get into some of those deep roots shortly. And what I think is, and I wouldn't know because I don't remember very much, but maybe it has to do with being in the womb. And maybe one of the first sensations that we have is the ability to hear. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember being in the womb. So, and I didn't look up any science that's, like miking up women's stomachs so that they could see if babies hear or not. But they do suggest that you're supposed to read to a child in the womb and talk to a child in the womb. So it is possible that hearing is one of the first senses we develop.
Well, and as someone who's died and come back, I can attest for the fact that sound is the first thing to come back, at least in my case. I couldn't see, feel, or any of that stuff, but I could hear. And that sort of became the conduit with which I came back, which is kind of cool.
Right.
Like a music Jesus. No, I'm just kidding. Never actually claiming that, but I do think it's funny. I've like resurrected.
Yeah, and you have to think too, the process of being born, you're not going to have very good eyesight at the beginning. Babies are, have very blurry vision. And so, yeah, sound would be one of the primary senses that you would have to really rely on in your very early days as a human.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what's interesting about sound? You're reminding me of a really cool research article I read a couple months ago. And it was the concept of, I think, phenotypes. I'll Google that, but it's this idea that when you're born as a baby, your ears, your auditory inputs can recognize something like 700 types of sound variation. And as you begin to learn a language, as you're immersed in a specific language, and as you grow older, that gets trimmed down to just 40. And that's a lot of brain trimming, but that's part of why they say, you can speak any language when you're born because you have sort of the opportunity to learn anything and differentiate between anything. And then as you develop, the brain prunes away what it doesn't need, and we lose that ability. It can be honed, but it's always still based on the limited types that you can find. I'll find that word. I think
the limited bandwidth of the brain too. You have to prioritize stuff as you get older because you only have a certain amount of storage space as to begin with. So
I was also thinking too of just the ear as a biological mechanism, the inner ear, like the balance, everything, the liquid kind of being in there. Sort of sound and how all that kind of plays out even in your balance and things like that too, things that are non-auditory, and how it makes up a larger part of our reality than just listening to sound.
We did that whole...
go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was just going to say, I did that episode on like the vestibular sense and the way that it's in our ear, but it's the way that we understand our bodies in space.
Right. And that is, that's in the air as well. Lots of big reasons why sound would be so important to us. Corey has a couple comments here. He says, one of the early criticisms of electric vehicles was the lack of engine noise would be a public safety hazard during propaganda campaigns by proponents of IC technology. Made a big impact. Okay. And then one of the early commercial taxi companies was battery-powered cars. Yeah, I mean, electric cars were the first cars, right? For a long time, we used electric cars before we went over to gas-powered cars. And now we're going back to electric cars again. So it'll be fun. But yes, that is one of the, I know, Corey, there is a critique of that with the electric motorcycles. I've heard that the electric motorcycle... Yeah, that's a real motorcycle. I've heard that the electric motorcycles are actually kind of dangerous because they don't have that sound. And that makes the rider at much higher risk of being hit because they can't be heard.
Yeah, because motorcycles are allowed not to be annoying, but for the rider's benefit. So that cars know that they're around them. Right. Unless you're driving a modern car where if the windows are up, you can't hear shit.
That's true.
Man, good luck.
Except, what's weird is that they all those modern cars, whenever their car phone turns on, it feels like it's outside. Like for some reason, I can hear every conversation in a car phone, but then when they turn it off and put the music on, you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what's going on with the acoustics there. But that's all. That's all to get to this sort of concept. Yes, Ayla, sorry.
I just was going to say, I looked it up. The word is phenomes or phonemes. Phonemes. And we're born with 800 and we come down to discriminate about 40 for our own languages.
So a phoneme would be like a sound, right? Like
it makes up the words they hear all around them.
Okay.
Right.
So it's like
would be a phoneme.
I believe so, yeah. And
Mhm.
apparently, extreme variation in phonemes is why Apple's Siri still doesn't work flawlessly.
Yeah, I
Uh,
can't understand accents very well.
yeah, and like a
But to
simple
be
vowel.
fair,
Huh,
I can't understand some accents.
that's
That's
true.
true. Yeah,
That's true.
Scottish accents are pretty tough.
Yeah, they
Um,
gave an example of a simple vowel like ah and how it varies widely when spoken by different people at different speaking rates and in different contexts, like Bach versus rock.
mhm. Or
Or
um,
bringing it
yes,
back. All
bring
right.
it back. Yes, which again kind of points to maybe perhaps everybody's is a little bit different, just in the way that we pronounce words and we make sounds. Also, the resonance within our chest and our vocal cords, all very different. It'd be interesting to see if you could sort of create like a password system with somebody's if that's possible. You might be able to spoof that. It might be too easy to spoof, but yeah. So let's talk about So this concept comes from the Hindu tradition, from the Vedas, from the Upanishads, which are some of the earliest stories in Hindu tradition, talking about tales of their gods and their parables and stuff like that. And this is where the concept of comes from. But it's a sacred syllable or mantra in Hinduism. It's one of the most important symbols of Hinduism, and it's variously said to be the essence of the supreme absolute, the conscious Atman or Brahman of the cosmic world. So is considered basically the vibration of the universe. When Brahman creates the universe, it is said that he uses the frequency of to help shape things. And then also in later Upanishads, Brahman talks about the significance of and how it is integral to the fabric of reality, and how if somebody was able to harness this they would have the ability to do anything they desired. And I think specifically, I can get to that part real quick. I think if I had that.
Well, while you're looking, ladies and
Please.
gentlemen, and distinguished guests who are listening, there is a song called Xanadu by Umet Ozcan, Ummet, and then the second word is Ozcan, and it's the name of the song is Xanadu, Xanadu. Do yourself a tremendous favor, listen to that song because it's amazing. It's really good.
We're not gonna talk about Aretha Franklin. I think it was Aretha Franklin breaking the glass, like the resonance frequency of different objects.
Oh,
Able to use sound and vibrations to break stuff.
Well, Xanadu. No, I mean, yeah, that definitely too. I just was mentioning Xanadu because it's a guy that blends Tuvan throat singing with like hardcore bass inside your head. Yeah, it's got some beats. Cool. It's unexpected but epic.
It's a good song, so you guys should definitely check that out. Definitely get you vibrating. But yeah, so the Hindu tradition through the Upanishads is that is this vibration of the universe. It's been called by many names. So there are some I have here. It's called pranava, which means literally the four sound, referring to as the primeval sound. It's also called Ankara, which is like the maker, denoting the first sound of the sound of and connoting the act of creation. There's also Aksara, which means imperishable, immutable. And let's see, where's the other one? Udgitha, which is song or chant. And let's see. It opens. Okay, yes.
It sounds like an insult.
Huh?
I get that. Sounds kind of like an insult.
It does a little bit, but that's
what you call me.
Yeah. I was going back to the babies and the phonemes and stuff. Like, yeah, if you didn't know, it's kind of an aggressive word.
Yes,
Adgitha,
it
yeah.
is. Adgitha. It's probably sounds better when you speak it in Hindi. So
Yeah, as you said it like that, I was like, oh yeah,
yeah,
I guess it's
Um,
pretty.
It makes me think
probably.
of the name like Agatha, like a real like
Yes.
non-pretty name anymore. And it's like, you name your kid
Yeah.
Agatha.
Mm.
Or
Yeah,
maybe
and
you or something.
right.
What are you doing?
So the one of the Upanishads called the Chandogya Upanishad. It opens with the recommendation that let a man meditate on Om, and it calls the simple Om as Udgitha, and asserts that the essence of the syllable is thus: the essence of all being is earth, the essence of all earth is water, the essence of all water are plants, the essence of all plants is man, the essence of man is speech, and the essence of speech is Rig Veda. The essence of Rig Veda is Samaveda, and the essence of Samaveda is Om. So a little bit of a nesting doll poem in there about how you might create the hierarchy of Om, right, through the levels of mineral, vegetable, animal, and then past animal being Om, or this frequency. Let's see.
What I find interesting about this frequency is that there's I feel like a correspondence within Western like Catholic culture, I would say, but like Gregorian chants, like the old Catholic chants.
Yeah.
Those prayers and things like that, they bring out that low, like that Om sort of resonance with singing and things like that. And when you hear it, it's absolutely beautiful and kind of brings you back towards I guess it's like the resonance of the universe, or what they were called God or something like that.
Yes.
Which is why the Halo soundtrack is so great.
That is true. That is true.
That's
One of the
iconic.
best videos on the internet is all those boys in the boys' bathroom singing the Halo song. And it's just the reverberations make it sound so epic. Yeah.
Wait. That happened at our high school. We had to do that to use the bathroom.
That's a
you
good
go
call.
in, everybody goes in, you
Pat.
have to do the Om, and then you use the bathroom.
Yep.
I remember that was a dorm call sigil like sound or something like that. You'll be studying alone in your room, and then you just hear and you're like, oh, it's going off. Black Mama's coming down. That was my handle, at least. But.
Well, and I think that there's something there's something poignant about the note about Gregorian chants, and then also a lot of religious ceremonies happening in large vaulted stone rooms that perhaps amplify those frequencies and those vibrations to a point that they can sort of bounce off of the walls and bathe you almost in the sound. You think about this in churches, old Gothic churches made of stone, gigantic, very tall. Somebody who sings in those churches, you'll be able to hear everywhere. Same thing with mosques and temples. And so I think it was always very important for us to have religious spaces that had high acoustic resonance.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's definitely part of the design of it. Which is why you should never fart in those places. Everyone will hear you.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Somebody can't even shift in the pew without everybody in the church hearing.
I think I actually watched a video like very recently of somebody farting in a church.
Was it the one? Oh, I thought it was the one where the person held the fart for like their whole life, and like the church.
No, I don't think it was that one. No, it was just someone who thought it was going to be silent, and then it wasn't. And their wife was so mortified. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, a fart is just an Om in the other direction.
There you go.
Yeah.
Signifies great release. Surrender.
It's just resonating with the universe. That's all.
In the perfect harmonic place.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and this kind of moves us into religion and creation myth and all of this stuff, which is probably a good transition because, funny enough, I've thought in my head so many times, like, oh, yeah, sound is always associated with creation and all that stuff. Well, that's not necessarily 100% true. While there are some Hindu tales about Brahman and his using his voice to create, and there's also an Egyptian god named Ptah, Ptah, Ptah. He was also attributed with creating the world with his voice. I think the most famous instance we have of this is probably the Western Bible, the King James Bible, because in John 1:1, John the Baptist cites that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So even at the beginning of the creation in Genesis, God's kind of like in this abyss, and he has to speak. Well, and he has to speak in order for anything to happen, which I think is noteworthy in of itself. Everybody says, let there be light, and then and God saw that it was good. But he had to actually say something in order for that to happen. And so it kind of points towards sound being the first action in the universe.
Yeah, I'd co-sign that. I was thinking as you were talking about how like in I guess cinematic depictions of God, he has like a booming voice, when it's portrayed by a man. And
Yes.
you think about like a sonic boom, you think about the Big Bang, like there would be sounds associated with that, even though they say that space is quiet. If you were out in there, like you wouldn't be able to hear it. So that's kind of mysterious and
that is very strange, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to hear the sounds in the universe as they are happening, but well, now we can start to measure these things more with our instruments, but people thousands of years ago wouldn't be able to do that.
There's something interesting as you bring this up. Right here, I've been diving a lot into like Jungian psychology, so this is like the Red Book, which is all sorts of 10 levels of fucked up, if you ask me, but very interesting reading, like fucked up on a good way. But there's this little thing where it bumps into this notion as word being like the light or the thing of God or whatever. Like word is equivalent to God, and there's almost the main character in this runs into like a priest-like figure, but kind of shows how this word is still limiting, right? So you have Om, but you have the word, and the word itself changes the way that you see reality. But it can lie to you because it's such a limiting sound. If I remember properly, I was trying to dig it out, but I couldn't dig it out. But I think that's the gist of it, and I find that so intriguing that if we go back to kind of more guttural, like, if you go back to more like guttural sounds that are not shaped within some sort of language, then you might find some sort of freedom in expression, like some sort, like a little bit like it shapes reality in a different way, but you still need language to shape it so much so that things make sense.
Yeah.
But that sense making thing is so a lie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And perhaps these sort of primordial sounds are just sort of this like relic of past iterations of our evolution. And we're thinking about when we were, if this is the thing you're into, when we were chattering chimpanzees sort of making guttural noises. Perhaps there was more to pick up through those small sounds than you could put into words. Kind of how like they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Maybe those grunts were worth 1,000 words at some point.
And it gets down to like this notion of the logos, which is everything, the divine being, all of that stuff. Logos travels through everything. You could almost substitute it with this vibration idea of Om. but it shows the word in the original Greek text that was
Mhm.
passed by another philosopher and handed down. And it shows that like we have this word logos, it captures a certain idea, but doesn't capture the fullness of this Greek word that I can't say. That I don't have the actual ability in my throat to say. And I
Mhm.
find that kind of interesting where it comes down to God and like it was like the word and all of that, but it's still restricted to this language that you're stuck in.
Yeah.
It's so limiting, like so.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and in the Hebrew tradition, they spell God's name. I think it's W-Y or YWH, which is supposed to symbolize the God's name because you're not actually allowed to utter God's name, being those string of letters just sort of symbolizing what God's name is. It's like a placeholder. We got Corey here. He's got he was in reference to the way that cathedrals make everything amplified. He's saying Mr. Bean trying to eat candy in a wrapper, just filling up space and echoing. Yes,
I
exactly.
love Mr. Bean.
Yeah, he would be doing something like that. And then Corey's got one here. He said, "You can listen to recreated sound of a pulsar. It sounds exactly like a rock drummer going nuts on the toms. John Bonham
Ooh.
Pulsar. That sounds dope.
Yeah.
That's what we
Challenge
need to start
accepted.
doing. Music from space. We need to
Yep.
start taking samples of black holes, pulsars, quasars,
Yeah.
just putting them together in a symphony. That would be pretty cool.
Down.
Well, even, maybe even to just touch base on that really quick, we have this concept of resonance and the Earth's resonance and the frequency that the Earth resonates on, which is called the Schumann resonance. And it's about between 6.5 to 7.3 hertz. And so even the spinning rock that we're on in this vast universe is sort of ringing at a frequency, which perhaps is being stimulated by the space around it. Perhaps it's the iron core inside the Earth that's creating this resonance, but they speculate that most astral bodies have some sort of resonant frequency that they're ringing at, which would go back to Corey's comment about the pulsar.
Oh, and so astrology, not so silly after all. No.
You and your space.
I know. Well, I was thinking about like because I brought up Mercury retrograde in sort of like a professional setting as a joke, but then I also was like thinking to myself afterwards, like, yeah, God, that's been around for so long. Like, is it a joke? Is it based on something we just forgot? As a group. These are things I think about.
I did find some of these passages talking about words and stuff. If you don't mind,
No, go for it.
So you have this this priest-like figure running into our main character. They're talking about Phileus. I get that right. The Jew Greek philosopher who kind of mixed things together and ends up inspiring a lot of Christianity and some other stuff. And they're talking about this word. I'm trying to get I'm trying to get to the important part. Okay. So I, being the main character, I says, does it not say in the gospel, according to John, God was the word? It appears to make quite explicit the point which you have just now rejected. So the word is not important according to this priest-like figure. Priest-like figure says, guard against being a slave to words. Here is the gospel. Read from the passage where it says, in him was the life. What does John say there? And life was the light of men, and light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not understood it. It became a person sent from God by the name of John, who came as a witness and to be a witness to the light. The genuine light, which illuminates each person, came into the world. He was in the world, and the world became through him, and the world did not recognize him. That is what I read here. But what do you make of this? This priest-like figure then says, I ask you, what is this in the Greek word logos? A concept, a word? It was a light, indeed a man, indeed a man, and lived among men. You see, Philo only lent John the word so that John would have it at his would have at his disposal the word logos, the actual Greek word though, alongside the word light to describe the Son of Man. John gave to living men the meaning of the logos, but in its Greek form. But Philo gave logos in its Greek form as the dead concept that usurped life, even the divine life. Through this dead does not gain life, and the living is killed. And this was also my atrocious error. So there's like this thing where we have to be careful not to give to separate sound and sort of these sayings from words and construct meanings around them, I feel like.
Certainly. Yeah. And I don't think that, like my contention was that God said pizza and it was good. Although pizza is good. I do think that the action of speaking would suggest that noise was being made. So when I do sort of talk about that, that's more where I'm going with that, is that the word certainly, but the act is to create the word with some sort of sound. So I think that's where I was heading with that one.
Yeah, I think so. Like making sounds can be like you said, like noises can be worth more than 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, who knows what the word was? The word could have been eh.
So
and God said meh.
I got autistically fixated on that. I apologize.
That's all right. It's all right. But we don't know what the word was, so that's fair enough. I think there might be parallels with truth there, and especially with this wedding it to the concept of light, and so we might be touching on layers of meaning there for sure.
Yeah, and then to separate words from this notion of Om, right? To get back to some sort of divine resonance. Maybe the answer isn't in words, right? But the weird abstract notion of a word, which is just a sound.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting because religion is akin to spirituality, and I think both are sort of aiming at giving us a sense of peace and serenity, and I think it's funny, all these vibratory chants and cathedrals and things like that. When you make some of those sounds, when you hum, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, your vagus nerve. Yeah. And so that helps to sort of regulate from like the body up, to your mind kind of thing. And I think it's just interesting that something as simple as a chant, it's taken us all the way until now for us to prove on a physiological level why it, helps.
Mm-hmm.
It could be those, like Pick was saying earlier, like a password or some sort of thing. It could be a key to a lock of a certain state of being.
Yeah, big time.
Or how they made the pyramids.
Yeah. Corey says, historical record used to claim that Germans were without written language before the Romans, but recent investigation of old Germanic languages are hinting that a written alphabet existed. The Elder Futhbark, as it is being called, was apparently a phonomic, with each letter being a word and more complex words being scenes, like the Latin or later Romance languages. It's being reinvented now. That's pretty cool.
Let's be real. My Germanic ancestors were Brooks, and we didn't have no damn written language.
But isn't it interesting that we might be able to resurrect a long gone language? That would be kind of cool.
Yeah,
I would love to do that with Latin.
Yeah. Or go back to hieroglyphs, right? Nick, you're always talking about emojis.
Oh yeah, well, I'm just that's just kind of like a Twitter joke at this point. But yeah, we're already using hieroglyphs for sure. Let's see. There's one more that I wanted to talk about, and it's Tolkien. Yeah. So as far as creation myths go, so do you guys have anything else you want to add before I move on to that?
I guess just quantum entanglement of human individuals through shared vibrations. I think that's how ideas spread. I think that's how ideas are shared across the world without two people knowing. The same thing with animals. where
Mhm.
you pretty much just catch on the same wavelength. And the little things in your brain, the electrons in your brain that fire between the electrical signals, jump back and forth and carry information between them. Carry that with you, that share through sharing a resonance with somebody. I also think this is evidence, at least for some sort of notion of a soulmate, where you share more of sort of this vibration with one specific person, any other person, whether you know it or not, whether you've met them or not.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for blowing the last fourth of the episode, Mike. I
Shit.
appreciate it. No, I'm kidding. But we
Wasn't
will
me
touch
this
upon
time.
that. We're definitely going to touch upon that because you guys are hitting on all of this stuff. So I probably should have brought the resonance up a little bit earlier, but I'm almost done with the creation.
I apologize.
That's okay. It's okay.
We were jumping to Tolkien.
you're
I was going to fall asleep.
No, you're absolutely right. Right. Yeah.
Tolkien
All right.
slander right here.
Time for Mike's Betty Bye. Here we go. So I won't regale you with the entirety of the chapter for Tolkien's creation myth in the Silmarillion. I will just say that I will sum it up, and I will recommend that anybody who's interested go read it because it's only about 13 pages, and it's a really beautiful creation myth, to be honest. It's unique in its own right. And it really centrals around this character Eru Ilúvatar, which is kind of the analog for our god, or just the top of the hierarchy god. And Eru Ilúvatar creates what are called the I think they're called the Valar. They're called something. Hold on. He makes the Einar, which is basically like demigods or angels. You can think of them like angels. And he instructs these angels to start playing music. And he kind of seeds this symphony into these angels' heads, and they are inspired to play this grand, sweeping orchestral piece that twists and turns, and it tells a story of creation. And as this symphony culminates, in the abyss appears Middle Earth and Arda, which is the Earth for Tolkien. What I find really cool about this is that, of course, there is also a character in the form of a Einar named Melkor, who, upon listening to the beautiful, sweet creational music, decided that he needed to interlace discordance and dissonance into the song, so that there would be much strife, and the beauty and the perfection of Ilúvatar's work would be tarnished. And Ilúvatar sort of lets this happen, listening to the symphony. It's beautiful. And then all of a sudden this discordant music comes in, and the symphony starts to die out. But because Ilúvatar is so powerful, it's really only because he allowed Melkor into the symphony in the first place. And he sort of rubs it in Melkor's face by taking all the discordant notes that Melkor puts in the symphony and tying it all together into this beautiful end game catharsis that pisses Melkor off to no end. So much so that he decides that he's going to go to war with the rest of the Einar, because he sort of gets humiliated by Ilúvatar. But that's all to say that it's a really sweet story. It's a really beautifully written, as only Tolkien can write, and it's about 13 pages, so it's well worth the read. And it's probably one of the more beautiful creation myths based on sound that I was able to find.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like really beautiful. It reminds me of there's symphonies that go into like discordant sounds you use to create sort of like horror when you're conducting like classical music and that sort of stuff. But I find it really beautiful that you create those discordant things. It's like just symphony within itself, as you're illustrating. Yeah, it's really sweet and kind of a nice creation myth. Right? Because in a way you still need both sides. You need that discordant sound. You need just this thing doing its thing that's also, beautiful and things like that, to create some sort of story, to create some sort of conflict, to create drama, right?
Yeah,
because
and that ends up creating the reality.
Yeah, because you could create worlds without drama, but what is that? Right? There's an old quote that says that like plays are just life with the boring drama is just life without the boring parts, like all that stuff cut out. You have no conflict, you have no strife, you have no story. So it's almost a creation myth within this world, and then within the notion of narrative itself.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like its own little hero's journey within the creation myth of itself. Yeah, certainly. Ayla, anything you want to add? I'm going to talk about one more concept, and then we're going to wrap up resonance, and that should be it.
Yeah, I just like the concept of harmony and discordance being, sort of highlighted in that story, because, when you're in a peaceful embodied state, that's serene, calm, slow breaths, and when you're really anxious or having a panic attack or frenetic energy, that's like discordant music. And so to relate embodied states to this sort of musical lens is just kind of a really beautiful way of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sort of touches on something that we've talked about before, which is, the Platonic solids, these conceptualizations, this discord, discordant music being an embodiment of sort of so much. It's not just about the music, it's about the disharmony, it's about the, the depths that it can take you. And so, yeah, I think that all of it packs a very good illustrative punch, and that's why I think Tolkien remained so prolific for so long until they made Rings of Power, and then.
Oh, he's still prolific. Calm down.
Now his name cannot be uttered anymore.
Like I've respect. It's a personal taste thing that I don't like Lord of the Rings. I understand it's great storytelling. It's like the same thing like me and the Beatles. I don't like the fucking Beatles, but I understand they're great. But yeah, no, like this, Ring of Powers. At least Disney Star Wars is better than Ring of Powers on a nerd front.
That's true. That's a hard one, but it's
true. Yeah,
nerd
front. But going back to this sort of discordant thing, like if you listen to a really well coordinated like movie
jazz
song, but I'm thinking more kind of snobby, like classical stuff. I was watching this video about a massacre that happened in Russia, and it's old, long time ago when they still had czars. And this guy who basically used like a system of fugues to build this thing up, but there's discordant kind of disharmony sounds where like the brass section ends up getting on top of the string section. String section is representative of the people that were massacred. The brass section representative of soldiers that do it. Snare drums representative of gun sounds and shocks like that. But when you weave this all together, you can kind of tell a narrative and a story. And I find it interesting that is the reality of the story. And you have Tolkien building his whole world, does pretty much the same thing, but just through words.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a conductor who lacks the ability to write music, so uses words to write music.
Yeah.
That's kind of intriguing.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, he wasn't a musician himself, but he was a wordsmith, that's for sure.
Very quotable.
Yeah, Corey's got a good point here. Back to the sort of naturalist phenomenological side. Some of the most powerful sound we will hear is thunder. Every day we spin under the roaring ultra torch of the sun. The water is lifted by the quote hand of God, creating all the weather, and down it comes, making all life possible. Yeah, thunder would be the harbinger of rain, which then would bring life afterwards. So, yeah, absolutely.
One of the bigger vibrations we live, at least in SoCal, is earthquakes.
Yeah, earthquakes, big.
Like, I don't know how much we killed a lot of the ancient culture here within SoCal, but I wonder what they thought of that, like what that meant. Is it harbinger of good things or bad things?
Right.
Nowadays, if you're born and raised in LA, you experience an earthquake. It says the Chili Peppers. It's just another good vibration. Like I remember going through earthquakes, working on some project in Photoshop and holding onto a monitor. It's like, yep, this is another. Nothing's.
Yeah, I always give it about the 5-second thing. If it doesn't get like less than 5 seconds, then I'm like, all right, now I need to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Because usually if it just starts to shake and I'm like 1,000, 2,000, you know, and by 5 seconds, it's usually gone. And I'm like, all right, we're good. But speaking of earthquakes and resonance, we could also just do a little shout out to Nikola Tesla here, who got in trouble with his landlord for creating an earthquake machine.
Oh shit, that's my dream.
I think he attached to the building of his apartment or something like that. So he created this resonance machine, which was basically an oscillator, and he somehow fastened it to one of the eye bars of this building, this giant iron beams. And he got the oscillator to vibrate at the sympathetic frequency of the steel or the iron, and created an earthquake in the building.
I don't think he was human. I'm just kidding.
I want all base, no trouble.
Yeah.
But you know, the Mythbusters did an episode where they thought, you know, they tried to debunk Nikola Tesla's earthquake machine, and they found out that it works.
I love it.
Yeah.
All you have to do is oscillate something at its sympathetic frequency, and then all of a sudden it starts shaking uncontrollably. So
yeah, you could break stuff like that.
Yes, you can.
That's what makes me wonder about I guess running through walls. If you can get the things to shake at your own frequency, if you could just pass right through it or something like that, or you'd be just gonna disintegrate it, one of the two. But you know, that sort of notion.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Breaking down the sort of solid barriers, right? Because, you know, nothing is truly solid. It's all just, you know, electrons bouncing off of each other or whatever.
Yeah, there's far more space in between that than the actual thing that exists, right?
Right. Which is a good way to segue into one of the final concepts I wanted to talk about before we hit the resonance thing one more time, just with a little bit of tidbits and facts. But it's called Anahata, and Anahata is symbolized by the heart chakra, actually, but it means the unhurt, unstuck, and the unbeaten. And in Sanskrit, Anahata means the sound produced without touching two parts. And it is at the same time, it means pure, clean, or stainless. But Anahata is said to be in relation to Om because, and Ayla, I know you love quoting the Simpsons episode where Lisa tries to teach Bart about Zen koans. And talks about what is the sound of one hand clapping. Anahata is the sound that they're kind of talking about, but it also
Nick
is
can do it.
Reference. Well, the sound of one hand clapping is just one hand clapping. You can clap.
I can't
do that though.
I thought you could teach Bart Simpson about the sound of one hand clapping. I'm like, that's impressive.
Yeah,
that's not impressive, sir.
Yeah, the Anahata is sort of getting at this concept, which is this sort of ambient. I guess you could call it silence, or you could call it Om, or you could call it what did they call it? The sound produced without touching two parts. So this to me that suggests an almost omnipresent buzzing that is everywhere and almost permeates everything.
Is it similar to Hakuna Matata?
That means no worries. So I don't know. Maybe.
Just checking. I'm trying to check my reference and getting.
Corey says mostly empty. Yeah. Mushin in martial arts. There you go. Yeah. I kind of also like a Sunyata. We did an episode on that. Where we talked about this almost this concept of absence, but more closely related with Anahata, which is I think it's interesting that it has to do with the heart chakra, because again, a heartbeat is probably one of the first things we realize here as well. It's certainly the first thing we look for when a child is being created, right? We doctor gets this.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, sorry, yes, but when
Making a funny
when you
joke
go to
there.
the doctor takes a stethoscope and he checks for heartbeat or whatever.
Right.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So I like this concept that, like, yes, even in the most silent of places, you're still going to have a heartbeat, and maybe there is still a sound and frequency that is happening. It's just like we've kind of touched on earlier. It's just not perceptible by us. I know that there are many frequencies that as you get older, you can't hear anymore, which kind of bums me out. It's like once you hit 18, you can no longer hear like above 2000 hertz or something like that. And it just gradually keeps going down as you get older. And the older you get, the less you can hear high frequency ranges. And inversely as well, the younger you are, the less you can hear low frequency. So older people actually can hear low frequency more than younger people. Yeah, the bellow of an elephant. Yeah.
I gotta use the restroom. I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Also, wait, is that really true that when you get older, you can suddenly hear the bellow of an elephant?
No, not not that.
I was gonna say yes. Bring on the old age.
Yeah, no, you can actually hear lower frequencies when you're older, and you hear more high frequencies when you're young. Which
like with I'm just trying to contextualize that, like with music, or does it apply to like other types of sounds?
So frequency is just like a sound of vibration. So when we talk about frequency of like hertz, it's just an oscillator at a certain speed. So the bellow of an alligator when it's making its like mating call is at such a low frequency that it's imperceptible to most people. But as you get older, you can actually start hearing it more. Because you're more perceptible to low frequency. But what kind of freaks me out a little bit, and this kind of dives into the resonance theory. If while you're young, you have more access to the range of high frequency hearing, maybe it's because the cells in your body are vibrating at a higher frequency. And as you get older, your cells stop vibrating at such a high frequency. And perhaps that's why you have less access to hearing those things.
Oh, that's kind of creepy. I mean, that could be it. I started to think about this in terms of like the process of aging. And, for those people who think that what is this?
Panpsychism.
Panpsychism. Yeah. People who think that, I feel like they would be on board with the idea that, your body naturally fails in order to push you more and more towards your inner cerebral conscious experience to prepare you for the melding with the panpsychism afterlife or whatever they think it is, but I think that's kind of interesting to think about the differences in frequencies and how that sort of changes maybe your experience of the world, as you're moving through it. Yeah. I know a lot of old people who like, they vibe high. So I don't know that like it's crucial to your.
Oh, you're feeling insecure. Okay, I get it. No, that's not what I meant.
No. I mean, okay. What did you mean then? Sorry.
No, I'm just saying it. Yeah, don't worry. Young at heart still exists, but your cells might just actually be old. So
are we?
Well, and that's what I guess.
Stop the press. Are we still talking about hearing stuff?
Yes, I was kind of drawing a spurious correlation because I have no evidence to back this up. But we were talking about when you're young, your ability to hear higher frequencies as opposed to when you're older, you can kind of hear the lower frequencies. And I, again, very erroneously stated that perhaps it's because while you're young, your cells are vibrating at a higher frequency. And that as you get older, the frequency of your cells' vibration starts to get lower.
Ooh, I don't know what the vibration changes. The amount of cells. I know after 25, you end up recreating new cells at a lower rate than the cells that are dying or dying. Right. So you end up kind of feeding off. So maybe the frequency is still the same, but there's less of them to pick them up.
Or the cells just get really tired. And you're just
They
like,
get lazy. They're like,
"Yeah,
fuck
this-
it.
I don't want to. I don't want to vibrate today.
But-
Come on."
But there is a intriguing thing to kind of fuck all this up with. If you like to make horror, you like to make scary things, you pick a very high frequency that's not discernible by the ear. You pick a very low frequency that's not discernible by the ear, and they should be equal parts from each other. And you let that play out, and the sound. If you create nothing in the middle, the person experiencing it will experience a feeling of dread. So you may not
Oh.
hear this, and like for all ages, you may not be able to pick up certain frequencies, but that does not mean that you don't necessarily perceive them.
Mm.
Yeah,
You know,
very
that's
true.
interesting. Oh, Corey's got a comment here.
Yes,
There's-
there are a bunch that we'll never hear. Air is a bandpass filter, and in and of itself, and our ears don't ever get all that's possible in the air. Yeah, a filter on top of a filter. True.
Mhm.
But we have touch insight. Yes, it's a
Or
good
so
thing
we
that
think.
right. Yeah. There's
Yeah,
only so
what?
much that we can see and touch too. So-
What?
No, but it's true though. Like, again, going back, I was talking with my acupuncturist about consciousness because I added like 20 books to my shopping cart because the last time I checked on philosophy of the mind, there was some stagnation, and now it's like boom, all these books. But we were talking about, shoot, I just lost it. You were talking about the concept of the space between sensory input and perception of that object or thing or sound. Yeah. And that's something that people get interesting about because it gets into the nature of time, the perception of time. Do we live in the past? All these kinds of things. And it's just really fascinating. And to think about it in terms of ohm and sound.
Yeah, and that also
Yeah.
gets back into what Corey had said about the subharmonic register, right? So with the tuba throat singers, when they are ohming, when they're chanting, they're hitting two different frequencies at the same time, and those resonate, almost creating a tritone. For some of them, they can create that. And so, yeah, this sort of pushes us into the area of resonance, which gets to, yes, I'm sorry.
Before you move on, I'm remembering too. So, Mike, you were talking about that gap between perception about the frequencies in a horror movie. And it just made me think, going back to the consciousness thing, we all know about implicit memory, right? Which is the body remembers certain environmental cues from traumatic events. So, a microwave going off could remind you of something and be an unknown trigger. It's an implicit memory or something. And so I wonder if such a thing exists with sort of like unperceived input, like the horror movie where, you don't know it's happening, but something in your body knows. And to be able to speak to a body and bypass your like conscious mind is really creepy and cool.
Of course, the root of your body is the subconscious. It's the unthinking part, the thing that doesn't formulate thoughts into words, but into instincts, feelings, and emotions. And like adrenaline overload over things. I like to think of it of talking about, what is it, the sound. What did you bring up earlier, Nick? Like the sound without a sound or something like that?
Oh yeah, anahata.
Anahata. So I like to think about anahata as being in an open space where air flows regularly, and then being near a wind tunnel within that space without sound, but you would feel the change in pressure of that space.
Mm-hmm.
You may not notice the change of pressure, but you would feel it. If you really want to experience this, put on a pair of noise canceling headphones, and if it has smart controls, you can up the pressure in it, that thing, up it all the way up until the point where you take it off, you get really dizzy and pass out.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You can do that, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. Corey says, hearing is logarithmic, fading away from a center around the average human voice. Actually, we hear other people best of all. Yeah, that would make sense.
Naturally logarithmic base 2, not base 10.
Hmm. And says The Exorcist was the original one of the first movies that played with sounds of beehives and growling animals to induce panic responses. Yeah, rumor is that the soundtrack was muted in this regard, as the original caused people to hysterically run into walls and vomit uncontrollably. Well,
I heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't give a shit. We did.
Yeah.
Well,
and this can come back to the resonance thing, because bees are notorious resonators. And so, yes, if you were to capture the sound of angry bees, they are purposely resonating at a frequency that would induce fear. Or at least some sort of chaos or panic. And to Mike's point about the utilizing two different frequencies in the same time to allow the listener to fill in the space, that's exactly what the HemiSync process does. Yes. So our one for every episode, you can check out our CIA files about the Gateway Project. And that's exactly how the binaural beats work, is that one frequency is played in one ear, the other in the other, and then your brain makes up the difference. So it's quite likely that people, in the horror genre are messing with that stuff too, so that you almost create this third frequency that is like the fear frequency.
Well, and that's interesting. Hopefully. Well, that's interesting that you mentioned it as the fear frequency, because as you were talking before about the binaural beats going between different ears, it made me think about how I hate when that happens in songs, because when I hear that, my eyes instantly want to dart left and right. I don't know. Is that just me? Do you guys get like?
They used to do that in the 60s, and then they stopped.
They did.
Very strange,
because it's disorienting.
My head would go that way. There's a few songs that I listen to that will throw out shit to the left and right headphones and do that sort of thing. But no, I don't. Not for me entirely.
Yeah. Well, I guess
like neurodiversity, right? I just might be neurodiverse.
You could just be different. Well, it makes me wonder, because when you mentioned fear, it makes me think of this modality. It's called EMDR. I think it's like eye movement something, but it's supposed to help with traumatic events, and it has something to do with making your eyes move a certain way while you recall the scary thing. And I don't know. I'm just like, ooh, I wonder if there's like a connection there.
It could be. Sound might be a very important play to that. There's a thing what's your course? I lost the thing.
Did you say we'll take questions at the end?
No, yeah, right. Yeah, leave all questions. Yeah, no. I lost the thing. I was gonna say something.
I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to touch on. Yeah, I wanted to touch on resonance real quick right before we end this, because we're wrapping up here. There was this really interesting piece that I found on Scientific America that's entitled "The Hippies Were Right. It's all about vibrations, man." And it goes on to talk about the white paper that the author is writing about how consciousness may be the resonance of the cells in our body, and the sort of resonating with each other, like Mike was saying, this concept that we might have sort of sympathetic resonation with each other on personal levels, and that's where you get this concept of good vibes, and the concept of maybe even soulmates or personal deep connection, things like that. That the human brain, that this white paper that it's entitled "The Easy Part of the Hard Problem: A Resonance Theory of Consciousness," and it's by Tam Hunt and Jonathan Schooler. And I will drop this in the comment section, because that's actually a pretty interesting read. But it's postulates that consciousness, it could just be a product of mass resonance, and that it kind of takes the panpsychic route, where it claims that everything has a certain level of consciousness and a certain level of resonance, and that when things get together, they tend to amalgamate their consciousness. So they have it's a pretty interesting idea and a pretty interesting white paper. But I just wanted to touch on the concept of resonance, and then we can get off of the fence and head home for the day. But it makes me think about, like we've talked about before, but the shattering of the glass with your voice. I think that's probably the closest representation that I can think of when we talk about something like this, other than acoustic levitation, which would be the sort of same principle, the ability of levitating a solid object with sound, because you're able to hit it at the right directions with sympathetic frequencies, and bring it aloft into the air, or taking a crystal glass and singing at its sympathetic frequency in order to shatter the glass, which I've only seen a few times before.
You've seen it like in real life, or just on like?
Oh no,
YouTube?
Just on a video. I don't think I've ever seen it in real life. Have you?
I'd pay to see that. Let's make that like a fever ticket thing in LA, right? Like pay $45 and see
break a glass with your voice.
We have an axe throwing bar. Why not a glass sound breaking pop-up?
After you finish your glass of wine, you could put it down and then sing into it like an AI thing, and it modulates it properly. It fucking destroy it.
Mhm.
That would be cool. Yeah, you can see your voice and like the frequency it creates. So then you have to like everybody takes a turn trying to get higher and higher, or lower.
Yeah, I was going to talk about bees.
Bees, yes.
Bees. You brought up bees. That was the thing that escaped my mind that I wanted to bring up. And vibrations. You know how bees kill a wasp?
No.
The cuddle of death.
Yeah, the cuddle of death. They hug it to death. The whole ball goes around it, and it vibrates so much that it creates temperatures up to like 400 or 500 degrees or something.
They cook them.
Fahrenheit. In freedom Unix. I don't know about all you communist Unix. Whatever the hell you guys use. But in freedom Unix,
that's smart though, because they won't die.
But it's that vibration that they can do. That is insane. It's really interesting.
And it's how they communicate with each other when they're happy. They do a little dance, and you definitely use vibration to protect themselves and their nests. Yeah, man, vibration is everything. The hippies were right, and perhaps the act of oming is to bring yourself in sympathetic resonance with the ambient hum of the universe.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it's close enough. It's
close enough.
Chants. Same thing with all of that stuff. If you can generate a certain vibration with your own voice, whether high or low, no matter the octave. You ended this with like the French horn. There's two ways to play a French horn. You can play it very high or very low. But as long as you reach a certain vibration, you're golden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You lost me at French horn.
French horns are nice. They're pretty.
Instrument.
They're pretty instruments. They sound nice.
No,
hey, did you know it's the
longest? Huh?
Did you know it's the longest instrument in the orchestra? If you unraveled all of its,
yes. If you unwound all the spirals, yeah.
How long is it?
It is the intestines of the body.
Of the orchestra.
It's the intestines of the orchestra, yes.
Yeah, and without your intestines, you would not.
Well, speaking of like classical music, I recently discovered Lang Lang. It's a piano player, and does incredible adaptations of like established songs. I mean, incredible. So, but and you think about piano, which is interesting. Isn't piano part of like the horn sector? Like it's an unexpected instrument categorization.
Well, it's both a percussion and a string instrument.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
It plays both treble and bass clef.
Oh, that's why the song.
Yeah, with both hands, which is you got to have a good corpus callosum to play the piano. That's for sure.
Oh, you can feel it. Like I've been trying to teach myself piano, and I recently figured out left hand, right hand, and on basic songs. But you're doing your five song notes, and to do them in sync with each other, either being like a palindrome going like out and then back in, or the reverse. It makes your mind sort of like itch. You're like, something's going on.
For me, it's like drums.
Yeah,
like to separate your brain the way where your feet are doing something different than your hands and all that stuff, and your left foot is doing something different than your right foot. your right hand's doing something different than your left hand.
At different
It breaks-
speeds too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it breaks a little bit. So when it comes to like girls playing piano, I'm like, I have like a girl watching a guy playing a guitar in college. I'm like, oh yeah, you can play the same 5 notes, but go Alex, that sounds so amazing.
Yeah, we did one of those candlelight concerts, like classical music at candlelight. And it was a piano player, and she's just phenomenal. I mean, you see the whole body working to get all the way to the edge of the piano and back. And yeah, it's just incredible to see. I don't think I'd ever seen that before, like a live,
That was
just
in a
solo.
cathedral.
Yeah, really beautiful. Oh yeah, with the resonance.
Mm-hmm. Corey says the harpsichord is a plucked instrument, string instrument like a guitar. Very different than a piano, actually, even though they look similar. Yeah, the harpsichord. I think the harpsichord was what the Doors played a lot.
Ah.
Like,
I gotta look this thing up.
Yeah.
Well, and I mentioned kirtan earlier. They have an instrument. Oh shoot, what now? It's like it's not an accordion, but it's an accordion with a little like piano key set.
Oh,
Maybe that's the harpsichord. Hold
That
on,
might be it. Yeah.
Let's see.
You guys can check that out.
yeah. And then when somebody sings and plays the piano, or plays a keyboard, even
It's
Dear
called a
Lordy.
harmonium.
A harmonium. That's good. Yeah, I like the harmonium too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop
All right.
being distracting.
Did you find it,
Good.
Mike?
I think we're good. I think we're done.
Yeah, my brain is collapsing dimensions. You're fine.
Colosum is done.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool, guys. If you guys have nothing else, I think we are good to go. Good.
Yeah, fun episode, Nick.
Super duper.
Great at yeah, good job.
Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. We very much appreciate it. Shout out to Corey. Thanks a lot for checking in with us and giving us your 2 cents. We always appreciate. Very knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate that so much. And thank you everybody else. And Corey gives us a final ohm. Thank you. One final ohm. Yes, absolutely. And thanks to all of you guys for listening as well. Please give us a thumbs up and a subscription. Yes, Ayla, what?
I was just going to say, should the 3 of us ohm together to sort of round out the episode? We started separate, then end it with resonation of ohm.
All right,
That's
ready?
corny.
1,
okay.
2, 3. Oh. There you go.
Ooh, that felt cool. Digital ohms too.
Good job, guys. Thanks a lot, everybody. If you want to check out what we do on our podcast community, you can check out the page here. All of the podcasts are there for you. Let me put that up one more time. And
I was gonna say, Jesus, leave that there, man. What are you
No, just a little quick look.
Yeah. Thank you so much, you guys, for checking in with us again. Shout out to Corey and shout outs to you guys. Until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there and we will catch you on the next ExoFathom. Good night.
Peace.
Fathom out. Did it work?
Fathom out. What are you,
Fathom
Autobots? Autobots,
Fathom
roll out.
Fathom out with your Ratham out.